Pops, we are back, and I thought what we would do today is we are going to look at incentives. Because if you buy a car, you got to get a discount, right? I mean, you just always get a discount.
Okay. In the old days.
In the old days. So what
Yeah.
we've done here is every single week, Automotive News puts out consumer-facing incentives. They kind of just like take this smorgasbord of national programs. These are not necessarily regional programs, but national programs from the different manufacturers. And we've taken screenshots of 3 of them from this week in September when we're filming this, from this year, 2021, last year, 2020, and the year before that, 2019. Only one of these 3 years is a normal year. Which year was that?
Yeah. Well, that would be 2019.
Yes. So this will be really fascinating because it'll show you there's kind of like some vanishing money going on. You're not finding as many incentives.
Not kind of like. We need to. Leonard Nimoy, God bless him, when he was alive, he had a TV show. It was called In Search Of. And I think today's topic, if we were doing In Search Of the ever elusive automotive incentives.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a peek at them, and let's talk about what we saw happening last year, this year, and the year before that, okay?
Okie doke.
Okay, Bob, so we're looking at the incentive sheet from 2019. I know I sent this over to you earlier. Was there anything that in particular that stood out to you?
Well, the first thing I noticed is that there were a lot of incentives, and there was a lot of cash. Of money.
Yes.
Money. Okay, and so it was fascinating to me looking at these, the depth and breadth, I can't say it, of all these different incentives, whether they be finance incentives or cash incentives, back in 2019, which was the last of what we can call normal times, NT, normal times. So this is 2019 NT.
Okay, and then what stood out to me, Dad, is when you compare the 2019 sheet to, I don't know, this year's 2020 sheet, the number of brands that are even on here is just drastically different. Like, for example, this year, what Automotive News is able to pick up on are incentives and programs from BMW, Ford, General Motors, Hyundai and Kia, Mazda, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, Stellantis, Subaru, Toyota, FCA, whoops, that's Stellantis still, and VW Group, and Toyota, right? So it's like, I don't know, what's that, maybe 10, 12, something like that?
Yes.
Go back 2 years, we had BMW, FCA, which are now Stellantis, Ford, GM, Honda, Hyundai Kia, Jaguar Land Rover, Mazda, Mercedes-Benz, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Subaru, Toyota, VW, and Volvo. There are just more brands that had incentive programs out there than there are right now, which is pretty indicative of what's going on.
But the biggest part of it was, even though there were more brands that had incentives, look in the column where the cash is, and there's just so much more cash that was being offered to consumers to purchase these various and assorted vehicles compared to what you see today.
Let's compare like Toyota. 2019 Toyota, for example. This is both for Lexus and Toyota. On the current model year, so let's say on 2020, back in 2019, the current model year would have been a 2020. Everything on here, there was a cash incentive. You can see it on the screen. There's a cash incentive. Let's go to Toyota present. You've got some cash incentives, Dad. $0 to $1,500, $0 to $1,000, $0 to $500 on a smaller subset though of vehicles.
Oh, absolutely, much smaller. Yeah.
And also the dollar amounts. Actually, dollar amounts are somewhat in line.
Yes, they're somewhat similar, but there's so many less vehicles that it's being offered on.
Definitely. Then let's look at like the prior model years. So, for example, that would be in 2019. Those would be your 2019s. Yes. Right off the top here, I mean, like there's some big numbers. For example, Prius all the way up to $2,000. The Toyota Sequoia up to $5,000. Avalon $4,000. Let's look at the prior model year for this year. I mean, sure, if you're going to buy a Mirai, there's a $25,000.
That's a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, and that's why it has. And from what I understand, even with those type of incentives, they still don't sell. So apparently there's several $1,000s light as to what it's going to take to get somebody to say, yeah, I got to have me one of those.
And Dad, obviously size doesn't matter. However, the size of this chart compared to the other chart, it's just indicative, right? Like, it's just really, this 2022, or 2021, excuse me, it's like really small versus 2019. It's really big.
It's just that the amount of cash that a manufacturer has to utilize in order to sell cars today is minuscule in comparison to what they had to use 2 years ago. Okay? And which is why, even though they're producing less cars than they produced in the past, why they're making more money, because their marketing costs are so much cheaper per vehicle sold. It has just added money to their bottom lines because they haven't had to spend the marketing dollars to get the consumers to buy the cars like they have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions I remember I asked you on one of our streams was General Motors recently mentioned how they were going to double their expected loss to production as a result of the chip shortage. And then in their quarterly earnings, they also said, but our financial guidance hasn't changed. And my question to you was, how can you, if the business of a manufacturer is to wholesale and sell inventory, and you're doubling your expected loss of inventory that you're able to produce, how can you then say, okay, but our bottom line and top line numbers are going to be unaffected? Yeah, it's because you have to spend less to then incentivize the sale of those vehicles. So not only are dealerships able to say, hey, MSRP is the price, or add markup to it, manufacturers aren't coming in and saying, okay, and here's $2,000 to sweeten the pot. Like, incentives are gone.
Let me pose a question to you. What do you think would happen if manufacturers looked at what they had expected to have to pay to have a dealer sell each one of these vehicles? And if the number worked out to be $3,000 on average or $4,000 on average, what would happen if instead of paying the customer directly or indirectly via rebates, what if they just reduced the manufacturer's suggested retail price by that amount of money and didn't offer incentives at all?
You know just as well as I. There's a psychological game, right? Like, I want the deal, I want the discount, I need the rebate. Like, I hear what you're saying, but I doubt it. I doubt it comes to fruition.
Well, and in a lot of cases, the reason that people needed the rebate was because that was the requisite amount of money to be able to put down in order to qualify for a loan. And because the manufacturers knew that the customer didn't really have the money to put down, and most rebates were and are counted as cash down on a purchase. So that at least that way they can show the bank that there's an investment on the customer's behalf. Whether that investment was being financed via the manufacturer or out of the customer's own bank account was irrelevant to the bank that was placing the loan.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So my question for you, Pops, do you think that we're seeing the end of big incentives? I mean, if you're watching this video in 2021, you're still probably seeing football season just start. You're still going to see Toyota commercials and the summer sales events and the fall savings.
But they say all that, but they don't say anything. They're just saying, yeah, well, we're having a summer sales event. Hey, we're having an event. Hey, there's a party going on. They're not saying, come by, we're going to give you $5,000. I think for probably the next 12 to 18 months or so, that I don't know that we will see manufacturers putting big money to move the metal, so to speak, like they have in the past. I just don't see that happening. There's no need to right now. They realize there's no need to. They realize they don't have the product to do it on. And if they don't anticipate being able to sell 16, 17 million brand new cars next year, which I don't see how they can, and they realize that they can get by on 13 million to 14 million without spending all that money on incentives. I think until there's something that triggers an opposite reaction, and there's always something. God knows what it'll be, but there will be something that comes along, and car sales, as we know it, come to an end. Just come to a halt for whatever reason it is. And the manufacturers are going to go, well, we better throw some money at these things. And we saw it a year ago, March, when the country shut down for COVID. And, there were 0% financing for 84 months, $6,000 in rebates, $7,500 in rebates. And today, you might find a $500 rebate or a $1,000 rebate, and you ain't finding 0% interest in most cases. So until there's something that nobody anticipated that stops everything in its tracks, I don't think we're going to see big manufacturer consumer incentives for quite some time.
Question I've got for you, and I know you don't have an answer to this or like an exact answer to this. Incentives to customers are one of two incentives that are at play in a dealership. There's also manufacturer to dealership incentives, like, hey, sell enough cars, start getting into bonus money. Do you think that's still going on?
My guess is it's not to the same degree that it was, because the manufacturers find themselves in a position where they aren't able to provide their dealers with the requisite number of cars to be able to hit these incentive numbers that they put out there, these objectives. So there still might be manufacturer to dealer monies, but it will be based on something other than just raw sales. It might be more based on CSI or service CSI, but it's not going to be on sales volume because, well, they can't provide them with the vehicles for that sales volume.
The landscape of incentives is changing. Like that is, you can say that with full confidence. These worksheets from Automotive News make it crystal clear.
The landscape is no longer mountainous. It is more like the Atlantic City boardwalk. It is flat and comfortable to walk through.
Yes, and you also potentially, if you're trying to buy a car, might feel like you're getting walked on because you won't have any incentives or things like that to kind of pull you back up. We post the incentives weekly back on Join YA, so take a peek there. Not too terribly much to see, but hey, it does change a little bit week over week, and we're there to provide that for you.
Absolutely, take a peek and weep.
All right, Bobs. Thanks as always.
Thank you, honey. Talk to you later.
See ya.